If things like you're sitting in the living room and you hear your wife tell her kid, pick up your socks, and the kid doesn't pick up their socks, and mom leaves the room, and then what do you do? And my answer is nothing. Nothing.
Well, you don't say, pick up your socks right now. What are you doing? You don't do that.
Right. No. That's a bad action.
Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting, and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you're joining us today, especially if you're a stepdad or you're married to one. Today's guest, Mike Haney, is a seasoned stepdad who's here today to equip and encourage all the men out there who are currently playing the role of stepdad in their home, or if they're about to become one and they're hoping to gain some insider knowledge. As a life coach, Mike is passionate about helping men find peace and confidence at home. He's the founder of Man Courage, Courageous Coaching for Men, and we're so excited to have him on the show. So let's jump right into our discussion with Mike Haney, which I believe you'll find encouraging and insightful, whether you're a stepdad or maybe a stepmom navigating blended dynamics. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here on our show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we can start by just tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you're up to and your family dynamics and how you got to be on our podcast.
Sure. No, I really appreciate that. And it's been a little bit of a journey for me, as you might imagine. I've been in the professional world all of my career, and been blessed to be now in my second marriage for almost 23 years now.
All right.
Four kids total, two biological, and two of my lovely wife, Jana. So I'm really excited to share a little bit about what I've learned and how I coach others in this particular situation.
Wow. So 23 years into marriage. So can you tell us kind of where age range of the kids today?
Sure. Great question. Our two oldest both turned 30 in the last year or so, and I think the other two are 28, 29.
Okay.
We each brought two kids to the marriage of similar age. I think we were 5 and 7 when we got married. If the
Okay.
numbers are correct. So yeah, it's been a fun journey, and as I said, I've learned a lot in the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
So safe to say you've got a bit of experience.
So exactly right.
So I'm wondering, just fun fact question here. You were married in 2001. What is your anniversary date?
Let's think about this. It's February 3rd of 2001. It's my
Okay.
So 2301 was the date.
Okay.
Awesome.
The reason I asked that is because that's really close to our anniversary date.
Yeah.
Ours is
March
March.
16th of 2001.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very good.
We've been on this parallel journey for like 2 decades now, Mike.
Hopefully we can have some answers.
Yeah.
And we finally crossed paths.
That's
Yay.
right. That's good. That's good.
Well, I'm hoping we can jump in and talk about what it's like to be a stepdad. I've never been a step parent. So we talk a lot about stepmoms and step parenting and stepdads, but I don't think we've ever interviewed a stepdad.
Just me.
Yeah, just you. So I've got some questions for the two of you I want to throw out there and just explore this role of stepdad. So if you think back to the beginning of your journey as a stepdad, you're entering in, what expectations did you have at that point? And what adjustments did you need to make when it came to bonding in a step family? Because that's a big topic.
Mm.
It really is. It really is, Kim. I appreciate you asking the question. Being a new stepdad is a really challenging role, and very few people know what to do. As you might imagine, it's a very big leap from being mom's fun boyfriend to stepdad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I learned early, and also have learned in my relationships with coaching other men since, is the key element to think about is that the kids didn't sign up for any of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know I've made a lot of mistakes in my own step family and parenting life in general. So it really just takes a lot of patience and a lot of understanding to really kind of get through this particular element. One thing that I believe I did reasonably well early in my stepdad journey was, as we were considering getting married, we told my wife and I decided to get married. We told the kids, and they were excited, to their credit. I remember taking her kids aside with Jana there and said, "Listen, we're excited about being in your life. I'm going to be your stepdad. I know none of us really knows what that is, but I want to say from the very beginning that I'm looking forward to that. I love you. I love your mother, and I'm looking forward to being that. But also, I know that you love your dad, and your dad's name is his dad's name, and I don't know him well, but I know of him. I know he loves you, and I know you love him. So I'm not trying to step into that role. I'm just here to be another person in your life. So what I did as you might imagine, to try to set that aside.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stepdads may feel like, "Oh, you need to call me dad" or something. Well, that really wasn't my jam at all, and I think it's going to be very so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That it sounds like you were trying to kind of release those those binds that kids tend to get into when it's like,
binds.
Man, I got all these adults that I'm supposed to interact with and love and all of that. But you were trying to say, hey, let's not bind them up. Let's just set them free to love who they need to love.
Yeah.
Yes. And these loyalty conflicts are real. The relationship that they have with their father, their biological father, is very strong. And I don't gain anything from making that any weaker, except I don't know what I would gain by making it. The more supportive adults the kid has in their life, it might be the better, right? So
absolutely.
I'm just trying to be as supportive as I can, and I know they have their own history and their own issues and all that kind of stuff. I'm just trying to stay out of that as much as I can.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I really commend you for sitting your wife's kids down prior and letting them know, hey, I'm looking forward to being your stepdad, and you love your dad, and that's great.
Yeah.
I think you did something similar to that, honey.
I did something similar with Annika. I also kind of had that with your ex. And so we might talk a little bit about that a bit later too, that whole dynamic there. But those are important messages to share. And I think it's great to set those expectations early on, so that we can all just be free to build some of those bonds and actually build connection. Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah. You mentioned the word patience in there, Mike. Patience is really important.
Yeah.
Honey, I'm wondering how you had to adjust your expectations when it came to being patient.
Yeah. As I was listening and thinking about your question, one thing that's come to mind for me is, while I knew we weren't going to just start out bonded, right? I grew up in a blended family, so I knew it was going to take time, and I understood the patience piece, I guess, on the front end. But I think if I'm really honest with myself, what I probably expected underneath all of that is that the progress would be pretty much all up and to the right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so sure, it's going to take a while, and yeah, we're not going to be instantly bonded, but we're going to get bonded, and it's going to start at this point and it's going to end at this point, and it's going to be linear all the way through. And I got pretty blindsided along the way to realize, oh, there's going to be days where this kid doesn't actually want to be around me or like me or whatnot.
Setbacks.
And so really being able to step back from that. I don't know, Mike, does that resonate for you at all?
It really does. That whole idea of patience is important. The idea of the name of the blended family, right? Well, I mean, if you look in the kitchen, the thing that's closest to that is the blender, and you don't want to get in a blender, right? It just chops it up, right? So
Yep.
I wish there was a better way to name this. Ron Deal comes up with the crock pot analogy, which I think is a lot more timely and accurate. You basically put ingredients together and just put them on a slow simmer, and hopefully the end product is something that's palatable. So
yeah. So Mike, are you saying the correct terminology is this is a crock?
Definitely felt that way from time to time.
Yeah,
a lot of the folks in the situation.
Yeah, I felt that as well.
Step family kind of fits better because you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
That's right. That's true. Yeah.
Well, another reality of step families is that they are born out of loss, right? There's that loss of first family. There's loss of control and time spent with our kids. And step families are born into a lot of ambiguity, right? Those unknown dynamics of blending. So I'm wondering, what has been your experience with loss and ambiguity in your step family, Mike?
Yeah, it's a tough question. The ambiguity is really a thing that's struck me over the years. I had no experience with a step family. My parents were married for 50 plus years when my mom passed away a few years ago. So I didn't really know anything about life in a step family. And for men in particular, it's a challenge because the role of the father is definitely not the same as the role of the stepdad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very different relationship. And one thing that I have really found very helpful to understanding this is what I call the step family triangle. It's a method that's been out there for some time. I didn't invent it by any means, but basically it talks about the different sets of emotional, legal, and genetic bonds between all the parties in a situation. So if you think about the mom and her biological child, right? What more can be said about the mother and child relationship? It's very strong. It has a emotional bond, a deep emotional bond. It has that genetic bond. They have the same eyes, or they have the same mannerisms, etc. And then, of course, they have that legal bond. She is responsible for the child. So those have been in place ever since the child was born, perhaps even before the child was born, right from the time that the baby was inside her. So these are very, very strong bonds. And for that pair of people in the triangle, it's really great for the two of them. If you think about the mom and the new husband, the stepdad, really what they have there is the emotional and the legal bonds only, right? So, and those are hopefully strong, right? They did just get married, and that's a legal bond. So they are, responsible to one another. And the emotional bonds are hopefully there. But of course they are shorter in duration and can be much weaker, right? Than the others. And then, so if you think about the last sort of side of that triangle, the relationship, the bonds between the new stepdad and the wife's biological kid, it's really the only bond that can be formed is the emotional bond. And that starts from zero, right? And it's a role that, as we talked about before, there's no training for this necessarily. There's no instruction manual that's really out there that says this is how you be a stepdad. And most men are just trying to find their way, right? Well, how I coach men in this situation is to lower your expectations with respect to that connection you're going to have with your wife's kid. And the thing about it is that about the best you can aim for after many years is to be at the same level of, say, a friend or perhaps a favorite uncle kind of
Yeah.
relationship. That's about as good as it can get. And
Mhm.
one thing that I like to think about as the ideal is the concept of the balcony person. What that is that imagine the child is on a parade, and he or she just won something, and they're on the parade and they're going down the street, and you're up in the balcony, and yay, I'm cheering for you or whatever. Here's some confetti or whatever. So
Yeah.
that's the idea of the balcony person, and that's really about the ideal you can get to if you're in the stepdad role.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not on the float with them.
Yeah.
That's
You're
right.
You're up in the balcony. You're still acknowledged. You're still part of their life, but you aren't the central part.
Mm.
Well, you said it, Kim. You're not on the float with them, and I think that's it's a metaphor, right? But for some very real things, like what happens at high school graduation, what happens at their wedding day, the kid's wedding day. I mean, you as the stepdad need to understand where you are and how you want to present on those important days. Yeah. And do you want it to be awkward, or do you want it to be something where you can truly be an encourager, a balcony person, right? You want to have that a good enough relationship at that point in their lives where they feel comfortable and grateful that you're attending. But unless it is a special circumstance, I wouldn't expect to say walk the stepdaughter down the aisle unless there's something else.
Right.
This is the ambiguity we talked about earlier that she needs to address as a stepdad and be ready for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's interesting. One of the ways you kind of started that, Mike, is to say we've got to adjust our expectations. And when I think about that, I think, man, if I can keep my expectations around all of that bond and connection at an appropriate level, a little bit lower than maybe what I would actually really like to have, but yet I work toward being a trustworthy man of influence, somebody who builds a voice in their life because I prove myself to be trustworthy and I'm not demanding it. Yes. Then I wonder, do you think there might be some surprises that come up along the way that are really positive? Well, maybe it's like, hey, don't stay in that balcony, come down to the street. Like you might not actually be on the float, but hey, let's get a little bit closer than the balcony. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, that might be an upside, right? But I think if for a lot of the men that I coach that are in tough situations like this, I mean they might be pleased just to be in the balcony, right? So that they might be disinvited or something, or what have you. That would be really a real challenge for them. So again, managing those expectations is important, and how you do that is the way to do it. I have been, I'm blessed with some great relationships with my wife's two biological daughters, and they said some very surprising and very sweet things to me during the last 20-something years, and I'm grateful and cherish those. But I think that, again, trying to think of from their perspective, their own loyalty issue, conflicts, just like all children's situation, you've got to be, shall we say, managing your expectations downward. To aim to be pleasantly surprised when that happens.
Yes, I love that. Right, you get in the business world, right? We want to under promise and over deliver, right?
There you go.
So we gotta receive that same thing. It's funny. I was thinking about your triangle. I really like that thought. And I was thinking just about our experience personally. I think 23 years ago when Kim and I walked down the aisle, if I had to build a physical representation of our triangle at the time, I would say that bond between Kim and her daughter Annika was like made out of concrete.
Right.
I think the bond between Kim and me, that side of the triangle, was probably a 2x4.
Okay.
And then between myself and Annika, Kim's daughter, that was probably like a piece of straw at the beginning, right? And I think over time, what we've experienced is I think that 2x4 between me and Kim has probably been replaced with a nice piece of, like an I-beam or a piece of steel.
Good.
And Annika and I are probably like a 2x6, nice and or maybe a 4x4, that like there's still some, porous material there, and there's some things that can cut it up and whatnot, but it's grown from a piece of straw to that 4x4. And I don't know, I'm a word picture guy, so it helps me kind of see that and go, the more I made myself available, the more I was patient. And once I realized, this isn't going to all be up and to the right, and I just slowed my roll just a little bit, it actually started to create an environment that opened up opportunity for her to move toward me. And that core piece of expectation that you're talking about, I think is so important. So important.
That's great. Well, congratulations to you to getting there. I mean, next time you're in Home Depot, maybe bring a piece of straw and lay it next to a 4x4 and see how far you
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. Yeah.
And what we're talking about here, Ron talks about, is the motivation to love. The step parent comes in with a high motivation to love and to bond and to be involved.
Yeah.
The stepchild has a very low motivation. They're already managing all these relationships, and they already have two solid parents that they have that strong bond with. So their motivation is not even close. So we've got to figure out, how do we manage our own behaviors and approach in the midst of this big gap in motivation?
Yeah.
And so that brings me to my next question for the two of you, which is, what have you done to make that positive impact, to be that positive influence while you were navigating all of the relational and the emotional tension that always seems to come with blending, right? I mean, it's going to be there. So what are some strategies?
Well, for me, it's the thing that I have picked up over the years is to try to look within first. Right. Try to understand my own emotions and understand what my own feelings are in the situation. Because one thing that I think that has helped me, and again, I wish I had this on day one, but it's come to me over time, is that the kids didn't sign up for any of this. Right. We mentioned that earlier. Right. So the challenge is that if I can try to put myself in their shoes as much as I can, to try to understand where they're coming from, that really helps everyone in the family try to understand the situation better. I mean, these situations can be very tense. They can be very, very, very challenging for the kids. And I think you mentioned earlier about the relationship the kids already have with the two biological parents, and how that plays itself out. So one thing that I like to try to think about, if I can, in the moment, it's a question I ask myself. Do I want to be right, or do I want to be curious? What that means is that if I see a situation, my wife's kid is smart mouthing off to her or something, and there may be a temptation for me to jump in or say something, but I think that would be just a real mistake. And instead, if it's appropriate, say, well, gosh, I'm curious as to why that happened, or what did you mean by doing this? Or when that happened, how did that land for you, honey? And then have this conversation with your wife later in private, just to try to find a way to do it. But again, these tensions can be very challenging. And one thing that one can do with the child is to think about the concept of the emotional bank account, right? So, and it's like any bank account, you got to make deposits and withdrawals. Right? The deposits are kind things to say about the child, do fun things with them, invite them along if they like, etc., and just be there for the kid. Withdrawals are all the things you might imagine. Doing discipline, being demanding to the kids, walking around with a grumpy face, etc. These really make withdrawals on the bank account. And again, as you start your stepdad journey, even if you were a fun boyfriend, you may have a very small positive balance in your account. That can go away very quickly if you don't manage it correctly and keep making those deposits.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it feels like the deposits are disproportionate to the intensity of the withdrawal.
Right.
if we think about that. But what I heard you say was, hey, my focus in these tense moments is to be able to stay curious and really connect with your wife, like kind of behind closed doors of, hey, let's debrief that and help kind of work on problem solving of, okay, how can we do this differently or whatnot? Do I have that right?
That's right. Yeah. One phrase I like to use is be a detective of your spouse. Right. Well, honey, why do you? I'm curious about that. What happened with this situation? Or when your son said this to you, gosh, you kind of landed funny to me, but I didn't say anything. I wanted to face with you and later and say, how did that land for you? And but of course, then you're thinking about back to the triangle, right? If your stepson makes a what you think is a nasty remark to your wife, it's part of a conversation they've been having for years, right? It may be a funny code that they have or a catchphrase that they've used. He may be, actually wanting to say something mean to her, but of course he knows that he can do that because he feels strongly about the strength of her love for him. That just like all teenagers do, they can say things that are rough and mean to their parents. And but if I as a stepdad were to step into that somehow, say, "Oh, don't talk to your mother that way" or something, well then two sets of eyes will then come train on me. One of them is going to be very happy, right? Because again, it's kind of like you're interrupting their conversation, right? And again, I'm not talking about anything abusive. If it's a real safety issue, then you obviously want to say something.
Step in.
But it's a different level of conversation that sometimes you need to stay out of. Would be the wiser course of action.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying there is before you jump to your own conclusions of what needs to happen and what's going on in this conversation, this biological conversation, get curious.
Yeah.
And wait till later and ask some good questions and seek to understand what was happening there before you dive in.
So, honey, if you go back 20 plus years and you think about the first 2 years of our marriage, how much better would things have been if I had been more curious?
Oh, so much better.
Well, did you see that? She didn't even hesitate. Yeah. I think that's true.
But then you had never had any kids. You were
that's
a
right. I was a childless stepdad at the time.
So you had no idea what was going on there.
Like I came from a difficult blended family. And so I wanted to kind of fix some things, right? I wanted to right some of those wrongs. And so, I think as I think about these two elements, that area of being curious and being able to engage Kim in those conversations, I learned to do that.
You did.
A couple, 2-3 years in. The first couple of years, I was not very good at that. And then, this other side, I love your thoughts around like, hey, how do we fill the love bank with this child, this emotional bank, by avoiding direction and correction, right? Those negative pieces that the kids are going to see, but doubling down on acknowledgement, praise, those kinds of things. It's funny that simple strategy. If somebody is listening and they're maybe in the first couple of years, we did a little bit of learning. So Ron Deal actually came to our hometown the weekend before our wedding. And so we did some learning on the front end. We were like, okay, a few basic things like, okay, we get the crock pot thing and all of that. And so one of the things that we did is we did our best to try and keep me out of the discipline role. But we also sort of added to that and intentionally let me step in. We call it stepping into the sweet spots where if we were going to give Annika some good news, Kim did a great job of trying to allow me to deliver that as much as possible.
Let him shine.
Yeah, whether that was the small things like, hey, Annika, we're going to your favorite restaurant for dinner tonight. Or, hey, Annika, we're going to Disneyland for our vacation this year. Kim, it's not that she never delivered good news. And she was always present. but she really helped those first couple of years. She was very intentional. I remember several times where she's like, why don't you let Annika know this?
It's the power of positive association.
And basically the wisdom Kim had in that season was, we got to fill this emotional love bank, right? We got to fill that bank account between Mike and Annika, because their side of the triangle was concrete. They were solid and it wasn't going away. And so she wasn't going to lose anything by allowing me to step into the sweet spots. I think that made a huge difference. I mean, I don't really want to go back 2 decades and try again with a different strategy, but now on the other end of it, I think it made a big difference.
And that's so important if we go back to the triangle, right? Because that's where we want to be building, is around that emotional bond with a stepchild. That's what we've got.
Yeah, it's the only one we have, because as a stepdad, I don't have the legal bond or the biological bond. The only thing I got to build on, if I want my straw to get any stronger, is just that emotional bond, just like you pointed out, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, your situation, Mike. And as I've been reflecting on what you said a moment ago, I mean, yes, you had not been a father of your biological father before, but to some degree, that's a relatively unique situation and may have been actually played to your advantage. So what I'm saying is that I have 2 biological kids of my own. I brought those to my step family. Of course, think about my own triangle with them, right? I have the same strong emotional, genetic, and legal bonds to my kids. And I've had this conversations with them over years, and, funny jokes and discipline and all the things that dads do and such. So, it can be too easy, in my view, for a man entering a step family to take on, he sees, more small humans in his house, thinking they'll react just like his own kids will if he says, clean up your socks or whatever, and they will not. That's the key element of this. And again, a lot of men stumble on this particular thing, especially in the beginning, and they can make some serious withdrawals very quickly if they start barking out orders to their own kids. And then also, by the way, step kid, you also need to empty the dishwasher or whatever. And that kid's like, what? So that's a key element of this that the new stepdads particularly need to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're demanding or expecting your stepchild to do something they've never had to do before, that's a big withdrawal.
Especially if you're entering at the teenage stage. That's really challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. You're breaking down that love bank.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of parenting, we've got to talk about it, right? It's probably the number one reason why blended couples reach out to us for help. I don't know if you've experienced that, Mike, in your work with blended couples, but that's a real sticking point, of course. It can be confusing and frustrating, especially when we're talking about discipline and expectations. So I'm wondering, what have you discovered along the way when it comes to parenting practices? And you've talked a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more.
Sure. No, I really appreciate the question. It's a great one, and one that a lot of folks struggle with that we coach. And the key, if there's one message that I could give, is to let the bio parent be the parent. Let the biological parent do the disciplining, to leverage those 3 strong, long-lived bonds. They're already set there, and as you said, concrete, right? So in this case, we're talking about the mom should be the one to be doing the discipline. She should be the one who's reviewing the report cards and making sure the homework gets done and telling the kid to clean up her room. Here's her room, et cetera, et cetera. So to the extent possible, stepdad really shouldn't be much more than a monitor or a guide, right? Now, in an extreme circumstance, of course, this goes off the table. If your stepchild is running into the road, of course, grab her and pull her back. That's not what I'm talking about. But if things like you're sitting in the living room and you hear your wife tell her kid, pick up your socks, and the kid doesn't pick up their socks, and mom leaves the room, and then what do you do? And my answer is nothing. Nothing.
Well, you don't say, pick up your socks right now. What are you doing? You don't do that.
Right. No. That's a bad action. So one thing that hopefully can help at least some of stepdads out there is that if they have biological kids of their own, if the situation was reversed, what should your wife do or say, right? If you told your biological kid to clean their room and they didn't do it, at least for me, I wouldn't feel, it would be a big ask to ask my wife to tell her stepchild to do something that I told her to do, right? So again, that's a key difference, I think, between the biological and the stepfather roles, right? So and then another element of this is about if you're telling your wife or asking your wife to discipline your kids, or if she's asking you to discipline her kids, that can be a real source of conflict. And I think that women in particular, I believe, are generally they're much more attuned to what's going on in the family than men are, right? I think that's a fair point. And the woman in her mind, and this is something the stepdad can work with her on, should she be the center or should she be centered? Right. Especially with the relationship to say your kids and her kids. Right. So this is where it gets a little bit challenging to understand how these triangles all work together and how who should be doing what amount of discipline to whom. I know one thing that I've often seen is almost surely going to lead to disaster is when a woman with her own biological children marries a man, in a sense, anticipating that he will be a disciplinarian for her kids. Yeah. Well, that's a big ask of the man and of the kids. Right. Even if biological dad is out of the picture or, heaven forbid, deceased or some other, it's still very difficult for a child to have that same level of respect, attention, emotional connection with stepdad, even in those extreme edge cases. It's hard. It's a hard role for me to be on.
It's interesting. I think there was partially because of my own upbringing, there was a little bit of kind of that gut instinct heading into our marriage of kind of what you're talking about here of kind of avoiding that and whatnot.
Yes.
And I also think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, honey, but I think you had been single momming for a while and you wanted help. You wanted assistance. So a little bit to what Mike's talking about right now of not so much, I don't think you ever said, I want you to step in and discipline Annika, but you were looking for support.
It was clear I needed it. I was very permissive. Did not have a lot of authority.
I wasn't going to say anything, but So we had this interesting thing going for us where I feel like I did a pretty decent job of holding myself back from disciplining and stepping in. And I did pretty good at not, you need to pick up your socks right now, that kind of thing. But boy, that curious piece, like I said a little while ago, the first couple of years I struggled to partner with Kim well and be the cheerleader that she needed. And the partner is the best word for it, to learn great parenting principles together and then encourage her to really step into that role. But part of the instinct, I think, came from growing up. My stepmom, and I know we're talking about stepdads, but it's still a step relationship. She was thrust right into the center of discipline right out of the gate. And, and my dad and stepmom kind of moved to the erase and replace mindset. It's like, my mom was deceased at the time, and it was like, okay, here's your new mom now. You're just going to have to listen to what she says.
And your dad fully
and
advocated.
That was really painful for me, to the point where we had a terrible relationship when I headed into my late teens and into my adulthood. And so I think there was a little bit of instinct around that. And so all of that was a super long lead into a question that I have for you, Mike. What do you say to the couple? Because this was my experience as a child. What do you say to the couple, sort of similar to that mom who's saying, boy, I want my new husband to come in and do the disciplining. But sometimes there's couples that say, look, we're the adults, you're the kids, you just do whatever the adults say and like it. Mm-hmm. How do you talk to that couple where both of them really feel that that's the correct order of things?
Or the expectation.
That's interesting. That's an interesting case for sure. I mean, I think that I would definitely refer back to the step family triangle, because thinking about the strength of the relationships between the various parties, and if you have multiple people in a family, say each party brings 2 or 3 kids or whatever, you can draw, I don't know, there's the mathematical dozens of triangles and see how strong each one of these is on these 3 metrics, right? Yeah. And so if I were to think about all the relationships within a family, all the pairs of relationships between, let's say, the man and the wife, and the man and his oldest stepchild, and her and the youngest stepchild, and the oldest daughter and the family dog. I mean, all the pairs of relationships, right? Yep. If you had to work on one of those pairs of relationships, you would really want to be focusing on between the man and the woman to make sure they are together and have the education that they need, the coaching they need to understand these situations, because all the other things flow from their leadership in a sense, right?
Yeah.
The thing you just said, oh yeah, you should do what we say. Well, that particular couple may need to do some more work between the 2 of them to make sure that they are aligned on this situation, and then be role models for everyone else in the family. And that's really kind of a key first step in that situation you described.
Yeah. And that can be challenging as well, getting aligned around your parenting partnership and your strategies of how are we going to lead this family and who's going to play which role.
Yeah. And a little piece I heard you say in there, Mike, is like, what education do you need?
Yes.
Like the question that we can ask ourselves is, have I really done my research? Mm-hmm. Because if I've done my research, I know that over time, I do need to create a great foundation within my marriage, and we need to be partnered within this. At the same time, that takes a while, and it's not about, either or. It's either the marriage or the kids. It's about both and we're going to get there over time. So yeah, when I hear people entering into that kind of mindset, it's like, okay, we actually really need to do the research here and see what the long term. I have this other, like I said, I'm a word picture guy. You were just talking about all those different triangles that tend to exist, and I think about architecturally triangles, created to underneath for support to make a bridge. And boy, if we could do this concrete 2x4 straw triangle thing, and we made a whole bunch of structures under the bridge, and then just asked a couple, hey, would you drive over that bridge?
Good idea. Great visual. Absolutely.
How sturdy is
it?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to drive over that bridge. Anyway, yeah.
So true. Yeah. I mean, step parenting, rule of thumb, 101. Focus on connection, not correction. That's what all the research, all the experts say. And then learn from there how to build influence and build authority with a stepchild over time as you build that trusted bond.
Yeah.
It takes some work.
I like your idea, Kim, on parenting practices. And I think this is where I, as a stepdad, I think did a reasonably good job, and I try to do this to encourage other men in this situation as well, as to lead with your masculine energy. You do, right. So if you're in the home, the way to create relationships with kids is to go do stuff and be different, right? Work in the garage, go to Home Depot, and go to car shows, go to monster truck shows. There's all kind of fun stuff to do. And one thing that I love to do is, every town has a manufacturing plant of some type, right? So give them a call and ask if they have visitor tours or something. One of my fondest memories when I was a little kid, our school went on a field trip to the Frito-Lay plant. We showed how to make Frito-Lay potato chips or whatever.
Cool.
It was fun. So, again, there's stuff like that all around and do. And I think men in general are more about action and doing, and maybe as a way to as a thought is to lead by doing is
Yeah.
the way to go for new stepdads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that, Mike?
Please.
I love that thought and that idea. I'm an active guy. I like to go do stuff as well and experience things. And I would imagine there's probably a stepdad or two listening that's like, yeah, I tried that. My stepkid said no, or, whatever that
Right.
was. And I just want to say, you know what? There are going to be times they're going to say no. In fact, there's times when the biological kids say no too. So like we got to recognize that, but don't give up. Like keep asking, because your continued asking speaks something.
Yeah.
It says, I'm for you. I want to be in relationship with you. And so, yeah, we got to handle rejection sometimes, but I would encourage hey, I'm going to go check this, I'm going to go check out the Frito-Lay plant. You want to come with me?
Yeah.
Who knows if you get a yes. And when you do, man, enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
Tap into what they're interested in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. There was a sweet moment. I remember when my kids were young, we would go to Home Depot and they had this bathtub display. So the kids they would get in the bathtubs, and they had shower door displays, and they would go in and they were
Yeah.
And it was safe, but they weren't hurting themselves, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And then they had the whole toilet display, and they were kind of making like they were going to the bathroom with all these toilets.
Of course.
It was just a fun memory, and it didn't cost anybody anything, and it's something we laughed about later. So
totally.
Yeah,
Home Depot can be a great adventure for sure.
It doesn't have to be a big elaborate thing.
That's right.
It can be fun and silly and spur of the moment and creative and just
which is another great point, because that was my struggle, is when I would try to do stuff, I wanted to make it big and elaborate. We're going to go for a whole weekend over to this. And it's like, no, slow down, Mike. Like, we're going to go get an ice cream cone and throw the Frisbee around at the park. Let's start there, right?
Yeah.
That's good.
Hey, before we move on, I want to circle back around to another aspect of parenting. In those tough moments when, you notice that your wife has asked their child to clean their room and you see, the room hasn't been cleaned. And how do we handle that? One thing, just as a bio mom, my perspective.
Okay.
One thing that is not helpful is pressure. So kind of being that tattletale. Oh, they haven't cleaned their room up. Oh, the socks are still in the living room. Oh, they this, they that. The kind of being that tattletale and adding pressure to the situation is unhelpful. And honey,
so this must be out of research and all the people we've coached.
No.
It's you don't have any personal experience with this, do you?
You will admit that you did this early on.
I do admit it. I'll own that for sure.
And what helped us was that partnership, sitting down and, like you said, Mike, getting curious and approaching it from hey, help me understand what you're experiencing when this happens. And then working as a team to align around what is the expectation in our home.
Yeah.
And that is so much more effective than being that, nag. Oh, they're not off the screen yet.
Did you just call me a nag?
Well, the shoe did fit at one time.
You're right.
It doesn't
You're right.
anymore, but it did fit at one time.
A 23-year younger Mike probably is very guilty of all that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a key point, Kim, and I think I appreciate you raising it, because these things are, in a sense, predictable, right? If as in my case, you get married and you have stepkids in your life that are young, in the elementary school years or what have you, you don't really necessarily have checking homework or all this stuff, but that's going to happen, right, in middle school, and then later, and the other transitions are going to happen, like they're going to be driving, or they're going to be going to parties, and all the stuff that the kids do as they progress. And these are all great milestones for the kids and important for them to understand. So it's best for the couple to get off in a private area and have these conversations, right?
Yep.
So the stepdad might say, okay, well, honey, I see that you're very, it's very important to you to tell your biological kids to do their homework or to clean their rooms. They can't go outside before they clean the rooms, but whatever it is, right? I can hear with my ears and see that you're making those requests of your children. And that's great. And that's your business, right? let's assume that, for example, you say go clean your room or you can't go outside, then you go to the supermarket, and then the kid then goes outside. What do you want me to do in that situation, right? And it's not like it's a completely unpredictable,
right?
Unforecastable situation. That will probably happen because we've all been kids ourselves, right? So to have those conversations on the front end, then it's like, okay, well, then the wife says, well, just text me and then I'll call the kid and tell him to go back inside.
Yeah,
maybe that's the way to do it. Or no, husband, I think you need to go out there and grab them by the scruff of their neck and put them back in front of the homework. Well, that's going to be a tough ask for stepdad to do, and that's going to be a huge withdrawal in this emotional bank account we've been talking about. And I don't think that really helps anybody, even the mom, because then kid's going to be back to her and say, "Listen, what is going on with this guy? You shouldn't have married him." 47 other things come out of that kid's mouth that. Again, these questions ahead of time will be important, and especially as the kids get into their early teens, late teens, into college. Again, our kids are all up and out of the house now, and we're pleased to report they're off in the world and they're doing their thing, and so they're forming families of their own, and we're cheering them on, right? But so if I could say one encouraging thing to the stepdads of teens, for example, this too will pass, right?
That's right. They're back to patience. Back to patience,
right? Yeah. So the idea here is that just be as loving and kind to your spouse as you can. Have these conversations with her and come to conclusions together beforehand. Because these are not. You won't be surprised when it happens when the kid shows up drunk or kid wrecks the car or all the things that happen, obviously, and they're unfortunate, but of course they're a part of life, and ideally the two parents would be prepared to in general know what to do.
Absolutely. Yes,
that's
I love that. Thank you. So there is one interesting dynamic that's often present that men don't usually talk about as much as women do. So I want to go there.
Okay.
And that's, how do you navigate the relationship with your wife's ex-husband and all of the awkwardness that entails? I'm wondering, Mike, if you'd be open to sharing what that's been like for you.
Well, I do appreciate the question. I mean, it is a challenging area, especially for really for all men, and the men that I coach struggle with this in many ways. If you think about all the relationships between any two men in history, you pick any two, right? Hitler and Churchill, or the two presidential candidates, or I don't know, Jesus and Pontius Pilate, whatever. I mean. Think about the relationship those two men had, how maybe contentious or whatever it was. Think about that with respect to the two men who were the current and former husband of the same woman, right? So it's a very strange relationship, right? So she in particular has an interesting vantage point. I mean, she knows both their stuff, right?
Yep.
She's very familiar with both of them. She's seen both of them naked and all that entails, and she's seen all their insecurities, and she knows all their hot buttons and such, and both men know that, right? And that's a challenge, right? So there's lots of narratives that can be playing out sometimes simultaneously, right? Well, the new husband may feel, oh, I've got her now, and she's mine now, or whatever, and the former husband may say, he may either feel like he's lost her and he may be sad, or maybe, oh gosh, I'm rid of her. She's your problem now, pal. There's so many dynamics that can happen, right? So again, I think a key element to think about from the stepdad perspective is the loyalty conflicts that the kids likely will have. We talked about this a little earlier, but the kids may feel this, and the mother may be taking on some of that energy as well, right? She may, as I think one of you suggested earlier, the race and
replace.
Yeah. This is my husband now, and the other guy is blankety blank, and I don't want you kids ever think about him again. Well, that's a big ask of the kids, right?
Right.
Even if dad has passed away, even if dad was a terrible criminal that's in jail, whatever it is, the children are going to naturally want to have some understanding or knowledge or relationship with him. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that, particularly the stepdad, right? So, the stepdad may feel like there's the power struggles, right? Stepdad may feel he's constantly fighting for respect and recognition in the family, while the ex-husband may feel like his authority is being threatened, right? There's that whole thing. Stepdad may feel jealous of the ex-husband's past relationship with his wife.
Yeah.
Or the ex-husband may feel jealous of the stepdad's current relationship with his children, right? This is where country music, in my view, plays a key role. There's a sweet song about, I can't remember the exact lyrics, but it's something like, there's my house, there's my dog, that's my, whatever, and that's not my truck.
Right.
so someone else, there's someone else to replace this guy. He's driving by his ex's house and he's sad, right? He sees things that's song about it. So all those dynamics go into it. And as you said earlier in the process, what I did, at least initially, is to try to acknowledge that as to what extent I knew how to do when I was early in my stepdad journey with the kids, and say, listen, I know who your dad is. I know you love him. I don't want to replace him. But I think an important element of this really falls back on the woman. She really needs to help the stepdad here. And I know she's probably been complaining about her ex to her new husband and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. And I know the new husband probably has a point of view about this guy, which is of course colored in large part through her interpretations. And again, that's fine. But maybe going back to do I want to be right or do I want to be curious attitude on the stepdad's part, think about this from how to question assumptions about the ex, how to try to see what good you can in that person, and try not to step into the conflict between the two of them, even if it's ongoing for some time, right? So here's where the woman can be helpful and say things like, I know I'm still frustrated with my ex. He broke my heart or whatever it was, but I know that we have to get along for the sake of my children, right? Yeah. So, and again, have those conversations with your wife and try to dissect that as best you can.
Yeah, it is challenging. I think it's like you said earlier. It's just a weird relationship between a couple of guys, and it makes me think about how do we. This is probably a difficult. Well, I shouldn't say probably because I've lived it, but for me, it has been a difficult journey figuring out how to not view Kim's ex as the enemy, but really try to step into how can we be allies and to move from competition to collaboration.
Right.
Like if we can do some of that. Now, we spent 3 years in the family courts. In the middle of our 23 years. Rough. And it was really rough, and it was hard to hold on to that. Wait, there still has to be some element, some level of collaboration. And, quite frankly, when you're in those really difficult moments, like this is my wife and I want to protect her. Right. And yet what I'm protecting her from is this person who still has a very strong influence on a child that all three of us actually love,
are invested in,
and we're invested in. And so you're absolutely right. It's a very, very challenging relationship. I think about it, from a work standpoint as well. We go to work, us guys go to work, we do all kinds of different types of work, and there's other people there that maybe we don't always see eye to eye with, that we don't really get along with, that we don't really want to work with necessarily. But if we're going to be effective and we're going to be good leaders and we're going to step into that journey, then we've got to figure out how to move them from competition to collaboration. Otherwise, the whole team suffers. Right. It's the same thing.
Yeah, for me, the thinking about, again, this is only from years of experience, but and it's hard to counsel men on this situation as they're going through a painful family court battle or some other issue.
Yep.
But the long-term perspective is the one to be thinking about, right? And,
Right.
yeah, the kid is 10 years old, and everybody's going hammer and tongs at each other in family courts, but that kid will graduate from college, say, or high school, and you're all going to be in the same physical space with one another, right?
Yep.
Hopefully the kid will get married, 15 or so years hence or whatever. And then you're going to be together in the same room, right? And how do you want that environment to be? How do you want the temperature of that room to feel given all that's going on? I'm not saying, anything from a legal perspective here, but to have that longer term view on how to, how to react and how to address the things you talked about. I mean, I like your goal of being more collaborative with this person, and that's great. And that's men tend to know each other pretty well, and it's a whole chemistry, I guess, that the men have. I mean, is a man useful? It's kind of a key question, right? In the workplace, right? If you're working with somebody and you find they don't do anything, or they can't string sentences together, or whatever it is, well, that person's not very useful for this job, right? So. But what can that person do? Well, he can make copies, or he can drive a truck, or whatever it is. There's some value to every person.
Yes.
The question is to try to be as open as you can to understanding that, and find that value each of us have as parents, as fathers.
Absolutely, love it.
Collaboration can be an amazing thing.
Sure.
If you can get there. We had 10 years of great collaboration.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful and peaceful for the most part. And then
we didn't.
Then it all fell apart, and it was awful. So if you can get in that collaborative place with your wife's ex-husband, that's great.
Do your part.
I
mean, at the bottom line of all of it, regardless of whether you're working well together and throwing birthday parties together and doing all of the going all the sports stuff together, whatever it is, that's great. Or if you're on the opposite side of the court because you can't, the basketball court because you can't agree on anything or whatever, regardless of where you're at in that journey, do your part to be collaborative. And that will pay off in your stepchild relationship in the long run, because they'll see the way that you walk through that with integrity and character. And so do your part.
And like you said, Mike, the bigger picture is going to impact the bigger picture down the road.
For sure.
So anyone who's listening to this right now, I truly believe that they want to avoid those common, easy wrong turns of blending, right? They want to experience more connection and more peace. And so they know it's important to educate and equip themselves around these dynamics because, as you said earlier, Mike, knowledge is key.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who's listening to a podcast, kudos for you. You're learning, you're growing. But Mike, I wonder if you could share with us, what else do you believe is important when it comes to blending well?
Right. That's a great question. I mean, knowledge is key and it's important, but sadly, if knowledge was all we needed in any human problem, we wouldn't have so many problems, right? If all we had to do was look up the answer somewhere and do it. But of course, for all the reasons that we as humans do, it's just not something that's not how it plays itself out. So, again, I think for men in particular, it's a challenge because we tend to be more focused outside the home and in the workplace and doing things. And when we come home, we tend to just want there to be peace and to be calm. But of course, oftentimes these step families situations are not calm. In fact, they're maybe more tense and more agitated than even a stressful work environment. So I think that what I try to encourage men to do is think about the energy that they bring into the blended family home, right? What that means is think about it as you come home from a challenging day at work, that you lost the Smith account, and you're going to have to let you keep people go, or whatever it is, whatever's going on at work. Do what you can to leave that in the car when you get out of the car and go into the house, right? And just to try to do what you can to keep the energy light, have a smile on your face. One great quote I read early in my parenting journey was that children are profoundly deaf, but they have perfect vision. Right? So they're always looking for clues in the adults in the home, and a lot of it is facial expressions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you wander around with a grumpy look on your face, and you're kind of snorting and slamming doors and doing all that kind of stuff, you're sending off a lot of negative energy, and the children are very aware of that, as is like with your wife. So it's not something that a lot of men may not even know about themselves, because at work, that negative energy is not something that maybe it helps them get stuff done, or maybe it helps them encourage others to work harder, or whatever the result is, right? But that energy can be really destructive in the home. And so, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the activities, the fun stuff that men can do in the home. And those are always good to try to tap into. And again, go back to, if knowledge was all we needed, we'd be there. A lot of it is coaching, right? The coaching can help in the sense of to help a man understand the dynamics at work here, give him some specific ideas on his exact situation, and try to help him get to where he needs to be, right? Because that to me is really that's the only thing that's going to happen on a long-term basis. I know coaching has been helpful to me, and my own research and understanding has grown in this situation. And it's really something that, I think a lot of men can benefit from, and obviously a lot of women can benefit from it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really great point you just kind of wrapped up there with, Mike, is often we want to, as guys, we just want to do it alone. I can handle this. I can do this. I got this. And, there's certain situations where maybe we do. Yes. But I don't know how many stepdads I've talked to that's like, man, I can get this project done at work. I can get these employees to do this. I can perform. I can get all this stuff done. And I come home and this 13-year-old step kid is just hijacking everything. Like, how come I can't do anything here? Right. And part of a piece of that puzzle is, don't feel like you have to do it alone. Reach out and seek that coaching, seek that support. Find somebody who's farther along in the journey than you are, who's had some successes and honestly some failures as well, and they've hopefully learned from it and can help you through that. We don't have to do it alone, but man, us guys, we sure like to do stuff alone, don't we?
It's true. I think that one of the things that I know about myself and other men is that, for men in particular, we like to go in a place that I think John Gray calls the cave, and it's a very particular place we go. And there's what that is off in his own world, in a sense. Go and play golf, or go and do a video game, or go do something. What a man can help his woman understand that I'm going into my cave. I'm going to go do this thing, and I'll be back. I'll be back in an hour or 2 o'clock or whatever it is, right? So that helps the man. For whatever reason, men like to be alone. We like to think about this stuff. We may look like we're, puttering around the garage, but really our brain is working on some problem in the family or somewhere else. And and that's kind of how men are wired, and I'm not really sure why. So that is kind of how the process plays out. But to have that space to be able to do that is a real gift that women can give their men. And it's really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think women are wired that way too. We just call it self-care. Yeah. I need some self-care time.
I'm going to try that next time I'm hanging out with a bunch of guys, and we're like, hey, you know what? I think I need some self-care time. And see how that plays out.
And we all need that. And step parents especially need a place where they can go and get a break, and also a safe place to kind of vent and talk about their frustrations. I mean, there are valid frustrations that happen for a step parent. Yeah. And, from men, we hear this quite often of, no one appreciates me. I'm the one that goes off to work, and the only time my stepkids come to me is when they need something or they want me to pay for something. And then all the rest of the time I'm,
chopped liver,
stuck on the balcony, right? I'm kept at arm's length. No one wants to be around me until they need something. And that's a valid frustration.
Yeah.
That's something that men need to be able to have a place to say, hey, here's what's going on.
Yeah.
And then one of the beautiful things about coaching is it can help you to find a way to, let's get it up, let's get it out. It's real, it's valid. And now what steps can we take in order to not get stuck there?
Yeah.
Because you're right. We can't walk around slamming things and grumpy face and stomping our feet in this continual state of frustration and pain.
We can. It's just not going to get us
it's
anywhere
not helpful.
productive.
Yeah. it's going to do the opposite of what we want.
Right.
So how do we move beyond that? What are the mindset shifts that we need to have? What are the strategies we can try? How can we be intentional? How can we, like you said, Mike, talk to our wives about what our needs are? Because those are valid too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. So good, Mike. Thank you.
Yes, this has been an awesome conversation. Mike, if you could just give one piece of advice to a brand new stepdad, what would it be?
Well, be encouraged for sure, and be intentional about what you learn and what you do over the next few weeks and months are really going to play themselves out for a long time. So, as we talked about, hopefully in this podcast and other resources, just to get the information you need and then do it right. So that's the key. And so be encouraged. You got that.
Love it. That's great, Mike.
Keep taking those steps forward, even if sometimes there's a step back in there.
Definitely. Hey, Mike, if there's a stepdad listening and they're like, man, I really want to connect with that Mike Haney guy, where do they find you?
I really appreciate your asking. I really enjoyed our time together today. I've done a lot of work in this area to try to help men. And so my point of view is every man needs more courage, right? So I created a website just for that. It's called mancourage.com. Your audience can go there and check the things out about me, and so you can learn more about the work that I do and connect with me via that link there. So awesome. I really want to find ways to help men be the best version of themselves, and it's something that I'm really very passionate about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
we'll
so
put a
good.
link in the show notes to your website so people can find you easily. And we enjoyed this conversation as well, Mike. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sure the stepdads out there listening gained a lot of value and some insight from you. Thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate and honor and respect the work you do in this area.
You as
Mike.
well.
Yeah.
And that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.